Recovery operations. Kilos 1 and 2 are in the area of the landing site and are in a search operation.
So you just heard that call out from Tim Preiser, who you see on your screen there from the mission operations room. He just announced that Helos 1 and 2 are now at that landing site. They're pointing out something on the screen. I see some smiles. It seems like we might have potentially some more information on that SRC in the coming moments. Helos 1 and 2 will be surveying this region, looking for both that SRC and also eyeing up the region, looking at that parachute that was deployed.
Recovery operations. All of the ground supported vehicles have left rig and are in pursuit of the landing zone.
So some more team members are going to be heading out to that landing zone as well in support of those 4 helicopters that will be the main group recovering that sample. The main helicopter will be actually attaching that sample return capsule once the team has it located and ready to prepare for recovery operations. They'll load that on long line. You can see once again, some team members pointing at items on the screen here. We'll hopefully get confirmation in the coming minutes of that SRC location. Tim Preiser pointing at the screen now, wondering if he has any more information for us on where that sample return capsule location would be. We do have visual confirmation of that parachute, as I mentioned. Rich Witherspoon radioing out to the team. And now we have a view from our helicopter of the landing location. You can see the sample return capsule dead center on your screen, that kind of dark gray black object right there. And then just to the right of it, a little bit below, is our parachute. It appears to be resting on the surface. We're getting a zoom in now from our NASA helicopter. And you can see now the SRC. At last, we have a visual of it on the surface of the Utah Test and Training Range. I'm sure that is a pleasant sight for the team to see.
Recovery operations. Helo 2 has visual on the SRC. I repeat, SRC has been located.
And we have visual on that SRC. It appears that the parachute has also disconnected. It's a little bit off from that SRC, disconnecting from the back shell. The SRC appears to be resting on its nose, that heat shield that protected it the whole way down through that entry, descent, and landing. Lockheed is celebrating that moment. I'm sure they are breathing another sigh of relief here. It's been a wild morning for everyone involved. They've been up since the crack of dawn, just a little bit further north from us in Waterton, Colorado. They gave the go command to actually release that SRC that you see on your screen right there from the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft about 4 hours ago. It then ventured entirely on its own and now sits on its own for us here in the Utah Test and Training Range. So now that we have visual, the teams should be able to begin the recovery operations in just a few moments. As I mentioned, that first person on scene will be the on-scene commander, Stu Wiley. He'll be doing an environmental sweep. We're getting a nice close-up view. You can see the parachute disconnected. You can see some of the wiring of it there, just a little bit off the edge of our SRC. The SRC looks quite charred up from that entry in. That was expected, as we heated up to temperatures over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit upon entry into Earth's atmosphere. You can see a great visual of some of that rugged terrain out there. Just a sweeping expanse, very panoramic terrain at the Utah Test and Training Range. It's a great location for us to land this sample. The team looking a lot more relieved now that we actually have visual. And we should be able to begin those recovery operations shortly. Inside that sample return capsule are pieces of the asteroid Bennu. We'll be getting access to those samples in just a few days and actually seeing exactly what we got from the asteroid regolith. This mission continues to amaze me and everyone involved here. The engineering is ingenious for this mission, getting us with a robotic explorer to the edge of the solar system, collecting that sample, safely stowing it, and then actually transporting it back here to Earth for us to open up and analyze. The surface today was probably a little bit soft, so it looks like it's resting a little bit far off the actual desert. It doesn't appear to have dug in too much with that nose cone from the heat shield. You are here with us as we witness this historic moment. It's the first time the United States has delivered samples from an asteroid to Earth, and these samples will be analyzed for decades to come in laboratories around the world. And there is landing of our first helicopter at the site. Appears to have a nice soft landing. We're just probably a couple hundred feet.
Recovery operations. Helo 1 has landed at the recovery site.
So our first helicopter, you just heard confirmation, and you can see visual confirmation of that landing. We're maybe about 100, 200 feet away, landing away from that sample. So a little bit of a hike for our team members to get out to that sample return capsule and begin our environmental safety sweep. As I mentioned, our on-scene commander, Stu Wiley, will be the first person of the team to actually approach this sample, check the area for any unexploded ordnances, UXOs, that could possibly be out there on the range, and then also make sure that that SRC is safe for our operations team to approach and begin recovery. You can see where that parachute disconnected from the top of that SRC. That is the back shield that you see right there at the very top with that little bit of white wiring still coming out of the top. Our SRC perfectly landed there on the Utah Test and Training Range. So what you're about to see happening next is the process of recovery operations. This is a key moment of today's events to actually get that SRC from out in the desert into our portable clean room here at Dugway. It is crucial that we maintain the pristine nature of this sample that we got back from asteroid Bennu. It could hold the clues to how everything around us came to be, from the formation of the planets to origins of life here, so the team understands just how crucial the contents of that SRC is, and they're going to work as efficiently and as safely as possible to get that SRC contained, wrapped up in thermal blanketing, placed in a sample carrying fixture, and then attached with long line to our first helicopter there. It'll then be transported the long journey back here, a much more relaxing flight, I'm sure, for our SRC, to our portable clean room at Dugway. At which point the team members will extract the back shell and remove the heat shield from the SRC. It's served its purpose. We're mainly now concerned with getting the contents within that sample canister containing pieces of the asteroid regolith out of that SRC. We won't actually, as I mentioned, be opening that sample canister just yet here at Dugway. The team is simply focused on getting that SRC, or the sample canister rather, on a nitrogen purge, and this is to maintain that pristine nature and prevent any kind of contaminants from the atmosphere from getting into our sample within.
Recovery operations. Helos 3 and 4 have been cleared to land at the recovery site.
And the rest of the team is closely behind, ready to land at the recovery site to begin operations. This will be simultaneous action that you'll see here once we have the clearance from Stu Wiley to begin our recovery operations. At least from this perspective, I'm not noticing really any drag marks or any kind of roll marks, but the team, once they approach, will mark any possible areas of interest where the SRC possibly came in contact with the rough desert terrain. All of these regions will be sampled by our recovery team and will be passed off to the sample curation team at the Johnson Space Center. As they begin to unload and actually open up the sample canister there, exploring the contents within and making sure that no possible contaminants from the surrounding landing location got into our sample. We're getting a wider view now. We should have the helicopters that have landed nearby coming into view potentially. The team really taking extra precaution as they approach the SRC. As I mentioned, team member safety is paramount during these operations. There are possible potential areas of concern as the team begin these operations, including the temperature of that SRC. You see it looks quite charred there. It could still be a little bit warm. As I mentioned, it heated up to over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So as the cool desert air begins to cool down that SRC, we want to make sure that it is cool enough for our team to actually begin those recovery operations. We'll also be checking the gas levels of that SRC to make sure that it is not outgassing from the batteries within, heating up during that reentry. We'll also be making sure that there is no live voltage present And we see a view now from our high-altitude plane that has visual of those helicopters landed nearby, just at the northern part of your screen. You can see one of them on screen now. The top of your screen there, it is centered up. There is our helicopter, and it appears that we have our on-scene commander potentially walking over. This is, once again, our high-altitude WB-57 shot of our helicopters landed at the LZ, our landing zone. You can see some movement on the screen. It appears some team members might be approaching our SRC at this point to begin those recovery operations, the initial safety sweep. We'll just be observing from this high altitude for the next coming minutes, as the team actually will be setting up a camera on the ground for us to observe the recovery operations close up. And a note from one of the team members about the SRC itself. So they have approximately 40 hours. That is the amount of time it would take for any air to get into the sample. As I mentioned before, that sample return capsule is a complex network of piping and tubing inside of it, sort of like a labyrinth-like design, and that is intentional to make it incredibly difficult for any possible contaminants from the atmosphere to get into our sample canister. It's also sort of like a nesting doll, if you will, where it has multiple layers of protection that keep that sample safe within. All of that protective layering, once we get that sample into the clean room, will be shed, and we'll be able to actually access that sample canister within. The main goal, as I said, for today is to get that sample canister on a nitrogen purge. That is to maintain its pristine nature. And we have visual once again from one of our helicopters here orbiting around the landing location. You can see our SRC at the bottom left of your screen and its parachute that helped us get the last leg of the journey down. It deployed a little bit higher than we expected, 20,000 feet elevation. Original expectation was at about 5,000 feet. And this brought us down the last leg of the journey after a punishing initial entry into Earth's atmosphere over San Francisco, about 82 miles in altitude, to now resting on the rugged Utah Test and Training Range desert floor.
Recovery operations. The recovery team is in the vicinity, beginning their initial assessments.
So you just heard confirmation from Tim Prizer that the team is beginning to actually approach the SRC for that initial environmental and safety sweep. You'll soon see our on-scene commander, Oscar, Stu Wiley, approaching that sample return capsule. As I mentioned before, he'll be checking for any possible unexploded ordnances. You can see our mission operations team. They have been overseeing all of this morning's events, and they're going to continue. There we go. On screen, you can see front and center there, Stu Wiley, our on-scene commander, and right behind him is Victoria team. They are both wearing personal protective equipment, gas masks. That's for their own safety as they approach, as there could be potential outgassing from that sample return capsule's batteries heating up during re-entry. You can see him scanning the region. He is checking for any possible unexploded ordnances, UXOs.
Recovery operations. Oscar is performing the unexploded ordnance survey.
And you just heard that he is, in fact, doing that survey right now. You can see him walking around the SRC. This is the first person to come in contact with this SRC since it was on the other side of the solar system. We had sent this on a long journey. It was OSIRIS spacecraft. Finally delivering the sample, he is motioning over to Victoria team, who is shortly going to approach and begin taking some gas and thermal readings. You can see her walking over and must have given the clear for her to proceed. A little bit closer. Stu continues to pace around the surrounding area. All over here, the team will collect samples. He'll begin to place flags. You can see in his backpack, he's got a couple flags waving in the breeze. Those will be placed at areas of interest.